a lot of times it does come from a challenging situation, right?
Mhm,
Or it's like the extra help is needed in a way. And I think maybe
mhm,
that's where the spiritual part comes in because I think that faith and religion is also spirituality. It's
mhm,
the connection to something outside of ourselves.
mhm, right.
And so the awakening, I think it comes in these challenging situations and it ends up being like a gateway to allowing ourselves to open up to support that maybe we didn't think was there before. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Soul Snacks. So this week we are, so many people talk about a spiritual awakening, like it's this magical moment. But in reality, sometimes it can feel kind of messy and confusing and emotional, right? So we wanted to talk about that. So in this episode, we're going to talk about what an awakening really is and what it isn't. So, Cami, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Good,
Yeah.
I know. I
So
know. I know it just feels like every week we're doing this and we're in the longest, coldest, darkest winter of ever. So it kind of feels like I don't know about you, but I'm kind of over it at this point. I'm ready for some sunshine. I mean, just some sunshine would be
you
nice,
know,
right?
it's so funny because I was actually just writing a post for my Substack and I started it with like those words that, we're in that stretch of winter where everyone's like, quote, over it.
Mhm.
Which
Yes.
yeah, I think February is hard like that. But I will say so we just passed Imbolc, which is the 6-week mark between the winter solstice and the
Oh.
spring equinox. So we are officially halfway through winter. So
Oh,
no matter
hallelujah.
what the groundhog said and all the other stuff, it might not feel like it outside yet, but things are starting to shift a little bit beneath the soil. So yeah, we're on the upswing. But
That's awesome. Good.
yeah,
That's really good news.
everyone's like, I need to go someplace warm, please.
Yes,
Yeah, but that's real.
exactly.
I mean, spring fever is a thing, and I think especially in climates where you have the gray and the cold and the dark, and this winter especially, like it's been heavy. People want the sun, and they want to,
Oh yeah.
yeah. So, if
I know.
anyone leaves town right now, we're there to support you.
I know. I was at the gym this morning and I'm like talking to a couple of the ladies, and one of them, I'm like, "Hey, you got any plans to travel?" She's like, "Yeah, I'm leaving for Costa Rica tomorrow." And I'm like, "Ah, I'm so
Oh,
jealous." And then
that's
another
nice.
one's like in Aruba right now. And I'm like, I'm so jealous of those people that are just laying on a beach in the sunshine and the beautiful
Right?
water, right? I'm ready. I'm ready to be there.
I was FaceTiming with I have a sister that lives in Australia, and so they're like in the prime of summer right
Oh,
now,
that's
and
so
so
wild.
I know, right? And so I was talking with her yesterday and they were like having a pool day. She's a teacher and they were like everyone was going to the pool for the day and whatever. And she's like walking through the sunshine
Oh,
and I'm just like, oh, I'm like on the couch looking outside. It's all gray. I'm like, gosh, that sun looks so nice. And not only just the sun, because we have had a couple sunny days here, but it's like you can
yeah.
just tell like the warmth in the air,
Oh,
like the
yeah.
glow of a face where you're like, it's summer.
Mm,
So
yeah.
it's
That's
okay.
funny.
Every season has its thing though, right? And I
Yes.
think in order to really appreciate summer, we have to like sit
Oh,
in
yeah.
winter?
I
So,
agree. Yeah.
but we're getting there.
100%.
Okay. So, uh spiritual
Yeah.
awakenings. Let's talk
Yeah.
about it. When
Yeah.
you hear the phrase spiritual awakening, what comes up for you? What do you think?
So, in my view and my opinion and my experience, because I truly believe that I did have a spiritual awakening last year, leading into this year. It really is something that happens to you, oftentimes, because you've gone through some sort of a trauma, maybe you've lost a loved one, maybe there's something going on in your life that's making you think, differently about things. Um, and it can be kind of uncomfortable, but I believe that it's almost the way I would describe it is you really start to question um y- your experience as a human, the human experience and its relationship to consciousness, right? And you start to kind of see things through a different lens. At least that's what has been in my experience. And a lot of things kind of happen, and some of them are really uncomfortable. Some of them are really euphoric. And I guess it's all in how you process and kind of, you know, what is happening to your ego along the way. Um, but it's a pretty fascinating phenomenon. And I think it can happen to people. Sometimes it happens to people like midlife too. I know it's sometimes deemed the dark night of the soul, right? Where
Mm.
people are having all these feelings and things start to happen. But yeah, it's pretty profound and it's exciting. So I can't wait to talk about this and dive into this in this episode.
Well, okay, so I have a question. So when you hear the term spiritual awakening, like, do you think it's always a spiritual awakening? Like, what is this, and I guess maybe I should rephrase that too. Sometimes I wonder if people think that they haven't had one if they're focused on the word spiritual awakening.
Mm,
You know what I mean?
yes.
So do you think it always has to revolve around some sort of spirituality or not?
I think it's more along the lines of soul consciousness, and whether you wanna call that spirituality, whether you wanna call that consciousness, oneness, your relationship with the universe. Uh, you know, People say there's the human experience, and then there's the soul. Like, everybody has a soul, and everybody has a body, right? A physical body. I think when it comes to a spiritual awakening, it is more, um a soul experience than it is like a human experience. So it's more consciousness. I don't know if people who are and maybe there's people out there who are very religious or who believe a certain dogma, who think that spirituality is woo woo, too woo woo for them. And so they're not willing to dive into the whole spiritual terminology, I guess you would
Mhm,
say. But, I do think that it doesn't mean that those people can't have them. They just might not recognize them as a spiritual awakening. They might
mhm.
just think of them as simply a thought awakening or, an emotional awakening of some sort. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, totally, totally. I, um, I mean, I agree that I mean, when you just think of, like, what an awakening is, like, right? Awake, like, to
Mhm.
wake, that it
Mhm.
is a, an awareness around some sort of new thought, perspective, experience, questioning,
Mhm.
discernment, understanding, something like that.
Mhm.
And I agree that it seems like, I mean, in my own personal experience or in other people that I've talked to or just, podcast you hear, whatever, that a lot of times it does come from a challenging situation, right?
Mhm.
Or whatever that looks like. There's a situation where where yeah, it's like the extra help is needed in a way, and I think maybe
Mhm.
that's where the spiritual part comes in because I think that faith and religion is also spirituality. You know what I mean? It's
Mhm.
the connection to something outside of ourselves.
Mhm. Right.
And so the awakening, I think when it comes in these challenging situations and it ends up being like a gateway to allowing ourselves to open up to support that maybe we didn't think was there before.
Right.
And so and that hits us on a soul level, right? And then it also hits us in our human experience and our human lives too. But I really think it's like awakening to support that we have outside of ourselves that maybe we weren't open to before or it's a different way or something like that.
Yeah, and I think it's almost an emotional connection to something that's much greater than just my physical being, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the way it's felt to me. Because initially, if I had ever heard the word a spiritual awakening, I used to think of like the rapture, right?
Mm,
Whoa, like I'm just going to
mhm.
have this light beaming down on me and
Right.
something's going to wake
Totally.
up. And,
Totally.
it was what I had always been told or what I had always thought was the narrative of a spiritual awakening.
Yeah.
Um, but it's so different from that. Like, for
Yeah.
me, it's been so much more of a emotional experience and connectedness um, with the divine, like
Mhm.
with the universe and just, the things that are happening outside of my human experience and what I can control here.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I think it's different when you go through it. And if you're not aware of what it can feel like or what the signs are when you're having one and what those feelings are, then you might not even realize. You might just think you're going through like a midlife crisis, or you're
Yeah.
having like some sort of weird thought patterns that you just can't shake, you know?
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, because like I feel like as you're describing that, like this, I'm gonna say quote, like come to Jesus moment where you're like this light shining down and you're being lifted. And I think of these like ayahuasca ceremonies or the
Yeah.
things where people are like, these I don't want to use the word performative. What's a better word? Like I mean, they just feel like very big experience, right?
Showy, yeah.
Yeah. And those are very valid for some people too. Like,
Mhm.
there are definitely situations like that. Like, there's honestly part of me that feels like my first spiritual awakening was my dark night of the soul tripping on mushrooms that we talked about in the Pivotal
Mhm.
Moments episode. Like,
Mhm.
that was a Kickstarter for a whole new, to your point, emotional connection, a whole new spiritual connection, a whole new awareness around stuff that so I don't want to discredit those types of experiences, but I do when you think about these really like showy kind of things, they also make it seem like it's this like one day
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
this thing that happens and all of a sudden it's like, "Oh my gosh, I went through that." And I don't know about you, but I feel like it's not a singular day or a week. There could be an event maybe that takes place in a short time frame, but I think the awakening part is a much longer process too. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would say I would probably describe it more of as an ascension of connectedness.
Mhm.
And it's something that takes place over time, right? And
Mhm.
it continues to evolve. It's not something that just happens in a day and you're like, "Oh, wow, that was pretty profound." No,
Mhm.
it's something that just kinda happens, I think, when you become open to it.
Mhm.
When you're like I said, sometimes if you're going through a tough time, so mine came about because I lost my brother, and I was really close to my brother, and I watched him pass away, and, I was there, for the, day every single day of the last year of his life, and so watching something like that and not having control over something like that always, like, for me, led to the question of what happens after we die. Like,
Mhm.
there's just, this isn't the end. Like, what's going to happen? So that's when really started to like dive into things. I started to research. I started to read a lot of different books, and I wanted to know exactly what was going to happen at end of life. Like, what am I going to expect? Because I'm a planner. I like to make sure I'm prepared for everything. So, what is the last, 4 weeks before someone dies? What is that going to look like? What is 2 weeks before they die? What is 2 hours before they die? Like,
Mhm.
what am I about to witness? But what happened after was really probably where I started to shift the most, because I realized that there was just this knowing in me that he wasn't really gone. Like, and I still
Mhm.
don't feel like he's gone. I feel like he's with me a lot, just as much as he was before he passed, because
Mhm.
I can literally, like, I get downloads, I get like feelings, I get signs, I get all kinds of things. Um so but what has happened to me over the last year, that I can say with absolute certainty, is that my um this awakening has caused me to really take a good hard look at how I was living my life and some of the choices I was making. And it has really drastically changed my perspective on how I want to live my life moving forward. And I can give an example of that. So, I think it's really easy, for us, any of us who live in society today, to get caught up in all of the things and distractions that we're caught up in: materialism, capitalism, what's going on with politics, what's going on with social, what's going on in our environment. There's a lot of different factors that we face every day. And I think that I've really changed my perspective in terms of recognizing that there really is no there's really no time except for now, right? Is the present, and pulling myself into the present more and more, and learning how to um focus more on what I can do here and now and how I can make a difference. But those decisions and things and ways that I'm making a difference now are so much more heart centered than they were prior to me going through this experience. So I might not respond to something as quickly now, but I take the time to think about like what feels good in my heart. Like how can I make a difference that feels good and gives me joy and can, provide joy for other people. And that's really what I'm more focused on now more than ever. And I can even like I even have issues sometimes with I've kind of had some friends that I don't really even talk to much anymore because
Mm.
I have such a hard time, like, the way that I physically feel in my heart when we have discussions, is really tough sometimes because there's a lot of judgment and there's a lot of gossip and a lot of stuff that I used to do a lot. I'll be brutally honest, like, that was stuff that I used to do, and I'm just not interested in that anymore. Like, I'm not interested in any of the catty crap that, goes around, and I'm not interested in trying to keep up with the Joneses, and I don't care how much people make, and I don't care how people view me. All I care about is how can I live the true, the way that I feel best in my heart, and how can I do things that make not only me happy but make other people happy in ways that are authentic and feel good.
Mhm.
I mean, that's the best way for me to describe it.
Well, okay, so I'm gonna dig a little bit here. Um, so I've known you for like 15 years, right? Almost like 15, almost 20 years. I don't know,
Probably
somewhere in there,
well,
somewhere.
probably close to
17
20.
years, something,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So you're a person that's always had that heart and that focus on people in your life and the relationships that you build and stuff like that. So when I hear you say that like, and now all these decisions, what do you think about it came from this awakening
I
that
just
is different than how you were handling yourself before? Because I feel like that heart-centered focus, relationship, people has always been a part of you.
It has always been a part of me, but I feel like, I used to worry a lot about
Mhm.
what people thought.
Mm.
I was always a people pleaser. I always, would a lot of times do things because I wanted to see. I did things so that I could get like um, the good, like somebody come back and say, "Oh, thank you. That was, so nice of you to do that." Like
Mhm.
I wanted that. I
Validation of
needed
it,
that
of
validation back, right? And I used to worry and worry and worry and have anxiety over, like, I would sweat the small stuff all the time. Like I was
mhm,
constantly worried about stuff. Um, and I just remember, like, I now I feel like I don't like try to control and worry about things like I used to. Like I've let a lot of that stuff go. Sure, there's things that pop up every now and again that stress me out about work or things, that I can't control, but that's going to happen in the human experience anyway. But the way that I deal with things is so much more heart-centered now, and I really don't worry. I just don't worry about stuff anymore. I kind of just kind of let life um happen for me now, instead of like always looking at it as life is happening to me, right? And
mhm,
sometimes playing the victim and things. Now it's just like, the more I seem to let go and trust that things are all going to work out, the more things just work out. It's
mhm.
kind of miraculous, but I have had to be open to that, and it took me a long time to get to that point. And a big part of that was, because of my brother's passing, the constant questioning of, so I've got this life to live, right? And I'm so grateful I have the life to live. Like, how can I make the most of the time I have left?
Mhm.
And, um, so that's kind of how I look at it now. It's just a different lens, a different perspective, completely different perspective.
I'm gonna I'm gonna tangent here for a minute. I'd fill people in on something. So Cammy and I were actually talking, as we usually do, for like a half hour before we hit record. And I am the like, so there's something that you just said. Now I can't remember what it was, but it was like, I'm the person, like, I haven't been sleeping well at all. And for these last couple weeks, especially, like the weight of the world has been hitting me hard and like figuring out how we respond and what actions we can take and the injustices. It's like, I'm speaking specifically of like the political climate and all sorts of stuff like that. Right. So like Cammy's thought process, it cracks me up because I'm literally sitting here in all black today too, and Cammie's in this, like, beautiful light colored blue with her beautiful blonde hair, and her I'm, like, dark hair, sitting in black, and I've just been, like, the last 2 or 3 weeks have just been hard, honestly, and so I'm sitting here thinking, and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I should probably try some of that. I should probably, like, pick, like, what do I have control over, what do I not have control over, like, all the things," because I mean, it's a balance, right? And I think
It is.
when you have if the awakening is part of this relationship then that you're building with something outside of yourself, then it's always going to be something that you're working on, right? It's always
Mhm.
and it is really it ends up being a choice in continuing that relationship and continuing to work on things. And if like my first spiritual awakening was 20 some years ago at this point, right? And so and I think I've had a couple since then at different levels, but it's also a good reminder of like you can get out of practice with stuff that ends up being really important to health, well-being, mindset,
Oh,
our
yeah.
connection to things,
Mhm.
our relationship to to just the trust outside of something, that like, well, that we're not all here to do this alone, that there's something else supporting us collectively and also, just that whole thing. But it was funny to me because you're talking and it's like, you just like this beautiful blue color and the blonde hair and just like love. I don't want to say like love and light because I know that there's more depth to it than that, but then I'm like this curmudgeon over sitting in like all black and my brown hair
Oh,
having a really hard couple weeks. But um
but
yeah,
it
I don't
isn't
know. But
it is stuff that, I can describe it as, I have a I have an inner joy, like an inner peace and an inner love that is very strong right now.
yeah.
I can't really describe it, to be honest with you, but I feel happy all the time. Like, I feel joyous and happy all the time. Not that I don't have bad days, because I do,
Mhm,
like, absolutely everybody has bad days, right? But the way that I handle those bad days has drastically changed than how I handled them a year ago.
mhm,
Um, a year ago, if I had a bad day, I'd probably go to the bar and have some drinks and try to drown my sorrows in some alcohol, and then I'd feel better momentarily, and then I'd feel like crap the next day.
mhm,
Um, Now it's like when I have a bad day, I switch my focus to all of the things that I'm grateful for. Like,
mhm,
sure, I'm having a bad day, but you know what? I'm alive. I can work out. I can go to the gym. I can, I get to work. I get to do all this stuff and maybe it's the simply from the sheer, perspective of I watched my brother not be able to do any of that stuff. Like he was
mhm,
so tired at the end, he couldn't even hold his phone in his hand.
mhm,
So when you go through something that is traumatic like that, it really gives you a different perspective. And I did connect with the divine, and I do have like this this essence, this love, like this it's and a lot of times I can't contain it. Like it's just I just feel it all the time.
mhm,
And but it's taken me my whole life to get here. And one instance I'm going to tangent for just a second
mhm,
because my mom is dealing with a health issue right now too. And I just spent yesterday, I went down and saw her and helped her with an appointment and went and got groceries for her and did some things around the house that she needed done to help her. And the whole time I was doing those things, it made me feel so good. Like I did it because I love her. Like I
mhm,
love her so much, and I want her to know I care. Like I care deeply for her, and I want to do whatever I can to make her feel better. Because when somebody is terminally ill, you can't do anything else for them, right? You can help them in ways that they need it, but you can't do anything about their health. It is what it is.
mhm,
But in my mind, I also know, like, I know I'm going to lose my mom. Like, it's going to happen eventually. Nobody knows when, but I also know that she is gonna be in an amazing place. Like,
Mhm.
she's about to go somewhere incredible.
Mhm.
And, like, I truly believe that. And so it kind of makes it easier because I know that the tiredness and the symptoms and the things that she's feeling right now are gonna be short-lived, and then she's going to experience something that is incredible. And, I just have that inner knowing and that faith, and it just makes me happy, you know?
Mhm. Mhm.
It probably sounds like, how can you be happy about something like
Well,
that? And I can see how people could think that,
yeah.
you know?
I think it's the again, like I don't actually think the concept of a spiritual awakening is that difficult, right? It's like, and I feel like I've already said it a couple times. It's literally a connection, a relationship, a trust with something different than what you had before, a power
Mhm.
outside of yourself. And I think I gather what you're saying, it's when you have some sort of concept or faith or trust in something bigger,
Mhm.
those situations, end of life, like they are filled with grief because we only know those people. I shouldn't say we only know, but at this point, what we know is concrete of those people in our human life, right? So anytime that changes and someone leaves this plane, there is grief, there is sadness, there are all the emotions,
For
right?
sure. Yeah.
And there can also be peace and happiness and trust because of the place that they're going, right?
Yeah.
So no, I mean, certainly I don't think anybody listening would be like, "Oh my gosh, she wants her mom to like, of
Yeah,
course.
no.
Um, but I think
No.
that no, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, death was always a huge fear of mine. Like, I
Mhm.
just always, and I think a lot of people are terrified of death.
Mhm.
But I don't really have the fears anymore. I don't have the fear of that. I don't have the fear. I just I've moved so far away from fear in my life
Mhm.
that it's weird because I used to be fearful of everything. I was just like
Mhm.
the big scaredy cat. And
Do you feel like as you were going through your awakening, there were times where it's like, "Oh my gosh, like, is this normal? What is this?" Like, the chaos, the fear, like, the uncertainty, like, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think, in the beginning, I didn't know what was happening because I felt like I was doubting it. A lot of the thoughts that I would have or the feelings I would have, I was kind of confused, like, "What is going on? Like,
Mhm.
why am I pursuing this path? Or why am I getting these downloads all the time?" And I get, like, these crazy uh downloads a lot. Like, I'll be out and I'll see something. I know I've mentioned this before, but I'll see something that makes me think of somebody else and I will grab it and I'll send it because I just in that moment know that that person needs to have this.
Mhm.
And or I will shoot a text to somebody, not knowing they're having a bad day, and just tell them like something that I appreciate about them, and they just are like, "Oh my gosh, this couldn't have come at a better time." So those things are starting to happen more and more. But
Mhm.
so when those things started to happen more and more, I could not like figure out why all of a
Mhm.
sudden I was having all these random thoughts of goodness. You know what I'm saying? Because
Mhm.
I mean, I'm not saying I haven't been a good person my whole life because
Mhm.
I have tried to be a good person, but um it's elevated. It's just an elevated, like, euphoric. I can't describe the feeling. Like, I feel like every like cell in my body is vibrating differently. Like, I have a different vibration. Even when I just lay in bed and I like meditate, like I can literally hear like a buzzing in total silence that had never had before. So I've
Mhm.
something's got to be going on even physically, or I don't know if my soul is just outgrowing my body or something.
Mhm.
But that's what it feels like. That's what it feels like to me. And my experience could be totally different from somebody else's, but that's kind of what's been happening to me for the past year, in all
Mm.
honesty.
So I think spiritual awakenings also come in layers. Like, when I think about the first one that I had, which was 20 some years ago at this point, that felt like the most extreme, right? Because I was
Mhm.
probably in the dark more at that point in my life. And I say in the dark as in, yeah, a darker time. And also, none of the spirituality stuff was even on my radar at that point, you know? So the first one felt like it was very significant. And I think as other awakenings have happened, they build. And I don't think any of them have been as significant as that first one was. But I think what the other ones have all, like, they layer in, you know what I mean? And so you're building off of a foundation, maybe of this one that was, you know, really incredible and profound. And then these other ones come in and now they're starting to build off of that. So I don't feel like any of my other ones have been as like euphoric as that first one was. But I think what they've helped me do
Mhm.
is like it's the boomerang, right? Where it was, hey, I started with this one that totally broke me open. And I remember even having visualizations when I was getting started, like right after this first time. And it was, I was trying to do like yoga, excuse me, and meditate and just like do all the things. And I remember having visualizations of like literally parts inside of me, like cracking open and like seeing light come through. You know what I mean? And I just remember thinking
Mhm.
like, I am breaking open in a good
Mhm.
way, but like the things are just starting to crack and there's like this golden light that is now coming through and connecting to something else. Like it was a really, emotional, spiritual spot, right? But I think since then, what my other awakenings have allowed me to do is come in with a level of discernment
Mhm.
around spirituality as a whole, where it's taking all these really significant experiences and building and building. And now also almost coming back a little bit to say, okay, there's all this stuff out there, all these things that have happened. What feels really true for me, right? Like what
Mhm.
feels really true in my values? What feels, because there's so many different places that you can go with the spiritual awakening. There's so many different, there's cultural aspects to them. There's obviously like personal aspects, all sorts of stuff. And so I feel like the layers have allowed me to come back and be like, okay, what's really true for me now and my spirituality and how I look at things and what's important in my spirituality, because these other awakenings have allowed me to build up enough of a foundation to feel like it's all encompassing enough. So where I can now start really clearing a path that is like unique in my spirituality.
Well, and would you say that, like, once you got on the new path, so after let's just take your mushroom trip as the first
Yeah.
profound
My
moment
accidental
of change for you.
for the record too, I was not like, "I wanna go have a spiritual awakening." I was like, "I'm a kid, I'm gonna go, like, trip on some mushrooms, so I wanna."
But didn't you feel like, once you started making those changes, you recognized that a change need to be made, right? Because you started to kinda crack open a little bit. You started to get into yoga, you started eating healthier, and those things kind of compounded on one another. And then did you start to feel better physically, emotionally? Like, what did that feel like during that time as you started to kind of get momentum going?
I mean, I can't remember if I mentioned this in the episode that we did, but I think there was it started, yes, in all the ways. I started to feel different and I started to feel better, right? Because I was starting to take care of myself physically, because I was starting to take care of myself mentally, because I was starting to like really prioritize, where do I want my life to go?
Mhm.
Like it was a part of the pivotal moment episode we did because it literally was a pivot in so many ways in my life, that and in wonderful ways, right? Um, but I still think it was the basics that were covered in that spiritual awakening. Like I would say,
What do you mean?
I mean, the like when I think of our like health, well-being, whatever, I think physical health feels like the most basic because it's our day to day. You know what I mean? It's the thing that like we really
Mhm.
have. um I don't want to say it's the easiest because I don't necessarily think that's the case, but I just feel like, yeah, okay, so switching what I'm eating, got it, check. I think mental health becomes more challenging because it's these thoughts and these programs that we've, navigated our whole lives, and the discomfort that comes with mental health and stuff. So I think that ends up being like a different layer, right? And then there's emotional health, which I think is another layer that can be really challenging because of the vulnerability, because of, how much we can carry in our emotions. And then there's spiritual health. And so when I say that it hit like the basics, I feel like that first spiritual awakening really ended up being about my physical health in a way, and then some of like the mental health side of things. I think
Mhm.
honestly more of the spiritual side of stuff and the emotional side of stuff came after a a really challenging time, after a hard breakup, a job change, moving cities, like where the things that kind of shifted in this first awakening, they were still there, but they weren't as strong for me to fall back on. It's like I needed to build on them because they weren't doing the
Mhm.
job
Mhm.
anymore, right? And so I feel like that was
Mhm.
when more of the spiritual stuff started to come into play. Like, yeah, I had been doing yoga and I had been like meditating, and there were some really profound experiences after that first one, but the relationship with it all solidified after the second one. It was like, oh,
Mhm.
this isn't just something I'm going to rely on when I need it. This is going to be something that is now a part of my day to day. It's part of like the pieces that are closest to me, and navigating. So I feel like that's really solidified in a different way. Um, versus the first one where it was like there, but it wasn't necessarily, it was more of like a tool, right, to navigate through in the first one, where it became more of like this is part of who I am now in the
Yeah.
second one, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and I'm curious, did you feel like during either one of those times, did you start to feel like disconnected from some old habits, from people, from beliefs, anything like that as you were kind of going through those? Did you find yourself like distancing from people, or
Oh
just
yeah,
like
totally.
the habits that you may have had, like, oh man, I can't do this anymore. Like I've got to
Yeah.
make a change, right?
I mean, that's a great question actually, because that the first one, that, like, it was changing a group of friends. It was changing, like, where I was living. It was changing it was, I can't do it this way anymore. But it was
Mhm.
all very much in my material day-to-day life in a way, you know?
Yeah.
The second one was when I can't do this anymore in terms of my thought patterns, in terms of my emotional stuff. Like, it was a deeper, I can't do this anymore. And
Mhm.
it was a really hard time for for different reasons than the first one, but because, like, there were times where I'm like, I don't know how to get through this. I don't know if I will get through this, you know? Um and I think that's where it became so much more of it was a different type of awakening, because it was
Yeah.
like, oh, like, what am I actually capable of now? Because
Yeah.
before it's like, oh, I can like change, and then maybe that's what I mean when I say like the physical health and stuff seems so much easier, because it's like I can change how I'm eating. I can go for
Yeah.
a walk or go for a run, but it's like, how am I going to change the capacity of my emotions in a way right now?
Right.
Like that's, so yeah, that had to shift after the second one for sure.
That's the hardest part too. And
Right.
I've painted this picture of like this, rainbows and butterflies of how I feel now, but leading up to it, like the year with my brother was one of the darkest years of my life. Like
Mhm.
I get emotional just thinking of like how many times I laid in bed and cried,
Mhm.
or it was like, I don't know that I can do this anymore. Like I can't
Yeah.
watch him suffer like this anymore. It's
Yeah.
horrible. Like it's horrible to watch someone you love, their life being taken from them. Like it's
Yeah.
awful. So those were all these, it brought up all of these crazy emotions that
Yeah.
eventually break through to like this, like you said, it's almost like this light. Like
Mhm.
it's so hard to describe. Because I don't think it just happens in a day. It's an evolution of emotions and connectedness. And um in a faith that's so strong in something outside of yourself,
Mhm.
but it's also a knowing of just like, you know what? Everything is going to be all right. Like
Mhm.
everything will be okay. I'm going to make it through this, even when you feel like you're never going to make it through.
Well, and it's funny because I think about it now and I feel like in the moments where like the first one, the second one, there may have been like smaller ones in between. Okay, well, I have 2 thoughts. Um, I feel like in all of the situations, and this sounds probably cliche, but it was at that moment where you're just like down on your knees in like a rock bottom sort of way, and you're like,
Mhm.
I literally don't know what to do. I need some help, like I need somebody there to help me, whatever it is. And it was just like, and I'm not, you know, I don't like I'm not religious. But it was like that calling of like, is anybody there to help me out? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And in
Yeah.
every situation where they're followed or that was followed with some sort of like awakening or big, moment or whatever, I feel like prior to I was literally like down on my knees at some point, whether
Yeah.
figuratively or literally, say like I can't do this alone. I can't do this right now. I can't like I don't know how to do this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then it like sure enough, like
And then you
things
did.
start to shift, right? Yeah. But I also think it's interesting because like when you had your first spiritual awakening, you were already into your 50s, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So my first spiritual awakening was when I was in my early 20s. And there's part of me that wonders if the age at which we're at when we have our first awakening also like our awakening meets us in the age that we're at. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So like like the emotional one and the heavier one that came with more spirituality and all sorts of stuff was later on when I was in like well, honestly, it was like right around my Saturn return. So if anybody knows
Mhm.
what that is, like probably isn't surprised, but um like in my late 20s, 30s, right? Where I've had that much more life professionally, just in all sorts of ways. So like if my first one was able to meet me in the place that I had been because I was in my early 20s, I didn't have all the experiences and all of the life and all of even like my rational brain wasn't even fully developed at that point. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Versus versus so maybe that's the other part of like as spiritual awakenings happening throughout life because I do think people can have more than one if they change and meet us based on the age and experience and life that we've also lived, right?
Yeah, I I've had experiences in my life where I have felt like I've hit rock bottom before, in my late 20s, when I went through my divorce and my financial ruin and everything that I experienced at that time. Um, but at that time, I just was like, all right, I got to pull up my bootstraps and figure out a way to get through this. And I had support. Like my
Mhm,
family was super supportive um, and I don't know if maybe I just look at things differently now as I'm older and I've had a lot more life experience um but this time felt almost like I just got like the biggest ongoing hug from the universe or something. I don't know. It just my perception before, I guess I could say, like, I learned a lesson and I learned to change things in my life, but I still kind of slipped back into some of those lower vibration types of
mhm,
actions and things that I did in my life. Um, and now I almost feel like I've risen above a lot of the stuff that I used to do, and I have no intention of going back. Like,
mhm,
I just want to be I just wanna feel the happiness, the joy, the positivity, like and sometimes that sounds so unrealistic because we live in a harsh world sometimes. But we also have the choice and we can choose a lot of the things we can control a lot of the things that the way that we respond to things, right?
mhm,
Um and we can control whether we participate in some of those things that are not so awesome, right? Like
Mhm.
being materialistic or
Mhm.
being in judgment of others or, some of these things that are lower vibration. Like I just don't have any interest in doing that crap anymore. I just don't.
I mean, yeah, I can appreciate how like it feels better, right? To be
Hmm.
to feel good. Um, I
Yeah.
think the problem I have is that it's not realistic. I don't think it's realistic to only live in that space because we're human beings and because all of the emotion, whether it's, quote high vibration, quote low vibration, whatever it is, it's all necessary for our human experience. For us to because we don't live here just individually, right? We live here as a collective to connect to one another. And I think that empathy and feeling the weight of things and the heaviness and the grief and the sadness and all of that stuff, which people would consider like low vibration, I think that's really important. And I think that spirituality as a whole, sometimes I worry that like especially in new age stuff, like it dismisses the importance of that piece of our humanity because that piece of our humanity, I think, pulls us into action to do stuff. And um, I think in a way, like somehow that's how we connect with people too, like, hey, if there's a shared experience, like we want to help each other out. We want to collectively level up to certain things. So like, yes, I want to live as much as I possibly can in the space that feels good. And also, how do I live in the reality where it does not feel good for a lot of people? And this is kind of like some of the stuff we were talking about before too. It's like the both, right? Because you don't want to get consumed on the
Hmm.
one side. And because we need people on living in the joy and the creativity and the beauty and whatnot to know what's possible, right? And to like be the light bearers and to carry the torches and all of this stuff. But while not like dismissing, and I'm not saying that you're dismissing, but these are just thoughts that I have, like by not dismissing the other stuff too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I don't want anything that I said to come across that I don't participate in low vibration
Oh,
feelings
sure.
because absolutely, like emotions are emotions and they're
Hmm.
valid regardless of whether they're high or low vibration
Hmm.
feelings, right?
Yeah.
Um I think the differentiator is how you react to some of those things.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I guess there's been, there's things that come up in the news that like could cause like I could become super frustrated. Like, "Oh my
And
god,
not
what
sleep.
is happening?" that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
and I could get dragged into the narrative of that, or I can make the choice to look at it from a different lens. So I could look at it like, "Okay, here's this person I don't agree with. I don't my values do not align with this person. However, I believe that this person is here for a reason and I am going to choose to believe that some of the choices that are happening as a result of the decisions that this person is making is all something that is supposed to happen for the higher good down the road in some way or another. Like so I guess the way I'm seeing things is different from that lens, but it doesn't mean that I don't have days where I'm sad or I'm
Mhm.
angry, or I get cut off in traffic and I'm instantly angry that, that loser next to me just like cut me off or cuz it does
Mhm.
happen.
Mhm.
Um but whereas I would get so frustrated if I had to stand in a line and, the lady in front of me is like talking to the cashier and I'm in a hurry and I'm just like sitting back there huffing and puffing, I take a minute and I'm like, okay, you know what? Like this lady might not have anybody to talk to at home and maybe
Mhm.
she's just chatting it up with the lady. And is it really going to matter if I stand here for an extra 5 minutes? Is it really
Yeah.
that big of a deal? And I don't get caught up in the frustration like I used to anymore because I take a minute to figure out how I want to react to some of those things. That makes
So
sense?
Yeah, no, totally. And that's a differentiator because in those situations, it's those little micro moments throughout the day, right? Where it's like, hey,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
it is how am I going to respond, right? In these little micro moments where if
Totally,
it's, oh,
100%.
if I'm getting annoyed by the traffic or I'm doing this or whatever, I'm frustrated or I'm pissed or nah, whatever. I get to choose how I want to respond and move forward with that, right? Which is
Mhm.
totally different
Mhm.
than our world is burning. Like that's a totally different approach of like, okay, I still get to decide how do I want to respond, but the
Right.
level at which we're talking about, right, is so different. That the one situation it's like, yeah, like buck up, let's do this, right? We can respond differently. Let's focus on the positive. Let's make this little micro moment something more meaningful. The bigger stuff is, and I don't know, maybe this comes up for me because I feel like there are so many spiritual people these days that like disengage from all of that, and that um I'm not going to tangent, but it really lights me up in a not a good way when I don't see people, when there's like not an accountability to some of like the bigger stuff happening, you know? But at the same time, like that's a totally different response, right? Like that is a global thing that's happening. Like it is so, yeah, there's just so much more to it. It's harder to like make a micro moment out of that thing and respond differently, you know?
So I'm gonna ask you a question.
Okay, this will be fun.
It might be controversial.
Okay.
Um, um, so why does it bother you so much that other people choose to dismiss or respond? Like they choose to deal with something in their own way. Why does that bother you? Why does it
Oh,
light you up?
Cammy.
I'm just
Um,
asking the question. Like I'm just curious why
well,
that would cause so much frustration.
yeah, okay. So I'm going to maybe dissect that question a little bit.
Okay.
Because I feel like there's a couple different angles in there. So, I think people dismissing is different than people responding in their own way.
Okay.
I think dismissing to me implies some sort of, I'm just going to turn the other way. I'm going to keep my head in the sand. I'm not going to recognize the collective humanitarian struggle because at the core, I believe that we are all connected. I believe we're connected to the trees and we're connected to the source of power, whatever that is. We're connected to whatever created us. We're connected to the animals. You and I, we are all connected. So to dismiss what's happening to other people in some ways feels like it's dismissing a part of myself too,
Okay.
because looking out for one another, loving thy neighbor, sharing this planet, like it's a big thing, right? Like it's a lot of weight. But I think we have a social responsibility to look out for other people because we're connected and we share this planet. So if people dismiss that, that feels like it feels selfish to me. It feels it just doesn't align with my values, right?
Mhm.
And people clearly get to have different values, but for me, it's an indicator of it doesn't align with my values. And while some people might be like, well, then just leave it, you know, like you're not gonna it's okay. People are gonna have different values. Yeah. And also, as someone who cares deeply about values and how people show up and how people act and the contributions that we make, it's hard for me to just
Mhm.
say like, "Oh, yep, you go get to do your thing," right?
Mhm.
Um, I think to the second part of that, like people choosing to do things in their own ways, that's great. You know, like let's take the example because it's recent of social media use. And
Mhm.
not everybody feels comfortable like sharing their opinions on social media about what's happening right now, you know? Um, okay. And I've seen some people saying like, I want my socials to be a place of like love and light and beauty and creating and yada, 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 a safe space and whatever. Like, I'm not going to get into politics.
Mhm.
And if they're out there doing other things, right? If they're out there calling their senators, if they're out there having conversations with people in their circles, if they're donating to causes, if they're, if they're doing other things, but social isn't the place where they're comfortable doing that stuff, awesome. But if it's, I don't want to talk about this stuff because I'm afraid of like losing followers or losing business or whatever else, that to me feels like we've let the platforms and the algorithms win over like the shared humanity that we have, you know?
Mm.
And so if they're out doing other things, that's great. In the same way that I have an issue with people only using social media to just air whatever they feel like, and
Mhm.
they're not also doing stuff in real life to move the needle. You know what I mean? So I think it's and I don't control any whatever anybody else does, but it's hard for me. Trust me, I would love to like not care about what other people do and to not feel so passionate about this stuff. But I again, like if one of the core pieces of what I believe is that we are all here connected, we are all here sharing this planet, and we have to somehow figure out what that looks like for humanity as a whole. I just have such a hard time when people dismiss some of that stuff.
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't even know if that answered your question, but
Yeah, it
that's
did.
why I
I
get
was
fired up.
well, no, I was just curious. I mean, it wasn't.
Yeah.
I just was curious why that
Yeah.
was a hot button for you.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
everybody's got their hot buttons, and I was just curious what it was about that that lights you up. You know,
Yeah. No, totally. I think y-
I
I
think it was
just want
very well said. Like what you said was very well said. I
thank
understand.
you.
Like definitely, like people dismissing is to me is almost feels disrespectful,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Like I want people to stand up for what is right. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? And I think you and I were talking about this before we hit record. Our generation has not really ever had to stand up for what we believe.
Mhm.
Our parents' generations, our grandparents, like all of these generations before us have. But I think our generation, we've certainly navigated some challenging things, right? But we haven't been in a position where we have to get uncomfortable and stand up for what we believe in. And so when I look around and I don't see people standing up for what they believe in, it's like, if you're not standing up against it, then you're standing for it, as far as I'm concerned. Like, I don't know that there's an in between. I want to think that there is, but I also think that right now, I don't know that there can be an in between. And so I want to see more people standing up for the values of humanity. And I think
Mhm.
that's probably at a level what really frustrates me because there's so many people like I know their heart and I know who they are and what they stand for. And it's like, and there's all these quotes you could throw around, like, silence chooses the side of the oppressor and like all sorts of stuff. But like, there's something about it where if we're not standing up, well, what are we standing for? And I think that's my thing.
Yeah. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. I'll be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
Only because I think that people can feel certain ways about things and maybe they can feel strongly and they can, have conversations in their circles, but not necessarily take it public because they're not
Yeah.
comfortable doing that. And y- I could be like a super strong advocate here over here in my little, neck of the woods, but you would never know it because I'm not going to put it on social media. I do not feel like social media will ever be a place that I would feel comfortable putting my political views on, and I will never do that.
Mm,
It's just who I am. I will never ever, that is not, in my opinion, that is not the place
mhm,
for me to be spewing my political rhetoric. It's just not. Um and I don't fault other people for doing it because I think if people are comfortable doing that, then they should by all means do what you want to do. You do you,
mhm,
but don't place that on me because I'm not comfortable and maybe you don't see the things that I'm doing to help make a
mhm.
difference. Doesn't mean that I'm not standing up.
Sure.
It just means that I'm not comfortable maybe doing it in that large of a setting. I might not be comfortable going to a protest, like that's not who I am. And
Mhm,
that feels ick to me. It's not my thing, but it
mhm,
doesn't mean I don't care. And it doesn't mean I'm not making a difference.
mhm, mhm. No,
That's
yeah,
the way I guess I look at it
well, and that's
differently.
that well, but I don't.
And
Like, I
maybe
don't
we're
know that
saying the
it's
same thing,
yeah, because
you
one is
know?
like dismissive, right? Versus doing
Mhm.
things your own way. So, like,
Yeah.
if you're out there having conversations with people in your circle, if you're out there calling your senators, if you're out there donating to causes, if you're in the capacity that you have to show up and to stand up for what you believe in, then you're doing the thing. It's like, it's when because we all have different capacities right now. Some
Yeah.
people have
Oh,
time they
totally.
can volunteer, others have resources. Some people want to protest and be down there, others are not. Like, we all have different capacities, and that's all of
Mhm.
it is necessary, right? But it's like, for people just to stand up in the capacity or to do the thing that they have capacity for based on how they feel, right? It's the
Mhm.
dismissive, like, turning an eye to it, the I'm not political kind of conversations, or like, that's the part that I have the bigger issue with, because it's like, I, that feels like it's I mean, it's privilege to turn away from it, right? And so I think that's the one that really gets me fired up more, versus the, hey, I'm doing things in my own way in the capacity that I have. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's getting harder and harder these days for people to have rational conversations about politics.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
And for me, um, I have one of my best friends has totally opposite views on politics from me, and we can actually sit and debate about it and have great conversations. And I'm so grateful for that
That's
because
awesome.
we don't judge each other. We both
Hmm.
believe that we have a voice and that we can believe however we want to believe, but we call each other on stuff, and I love that.
Hmm.
Um, and I think those are important conversations to have. But unfortunately, I think that what happens is a lot of times people will voice an opinion and then they're attacked,
Hmm.
and that's when it starts to feel ick. Like, I don't
Hmm.
like to be any part of those because it will light me up quicker than
Hmm.
anything, and then I'm going to be put in a position where I'm going to say something that I can't take back. And
Yeah.
so I don't want to have like I don't want to put myself in that position. So I have to be very careful with how I choose to have some of these conversations and where I choose to have them, because I want it to be I just I I just don't want to uh go down a road where there's just so much polarity, and
Mhm,
people are just so quick to attack these days,
mhm,
and I just don't want to be a part of that. It's not
mhm,
it's not a place I ever want to put myself in.
mhm. Yeah, it's,
So,
I mean, it is
and some people
what
don't care about
wild
that.
times we're living in,
Yeah, it
for
is.
for
It's
sure.
really it's very difficult. I know, and it's getting harder and harder, and I hope that
Mhm,
I just hope people will eventually come together and start
mhm,
to collectively come together and work together to get things
yeah.
solved.
'Cause I think, and I mean, I know we didn't expect this to turn into any sort of, like, political podcast or whatnot, but, like, I genuinely believe that most people that there is a huge portion of people that are just, like, in the middle on you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
there's a far side on one, there's a far side on the other,
Yeah.
and it's the group in the middle that I think, if there is, like, I think conversation comes from emotional intelligence, right?
Mhm.
And being able to sit and think, "Okay, well, this is triggering me, but why? I'm feeling defensive. Why?" Like, we have to have some awareness around ourselves
Yes,
in order
yeah.
to be able to connect and actually sit there and converse with people and be open to hearing sides of the story. And I'm not talking about the extremes on either side. You know what I mean? I'm talking about the middle,
Yeah.
because I don't know. I have to believe that, like, there's more that actually we probably agree on than we're so different on,
Yeah.
or at least the
Yeah. For sure.
foundations that we could agree on. But I think, to your point, like, the how you have conversations with people, you can only have conversations with people that want to have those conversations and who are also capable of having those conversations.
Right. Yeah,
And
cuz
because there's a lot of people that aren't. And
that aren't, and
yeah,
nobody wants to like get launched into a personal attack.
totally,
It's
totally.
completely unnecessary, right? But that's what's
Totally.
happening more and more, and I think that's silencing a lot of people too, because they're
Yeah.
afraid to speak up and they're afraid to do things because it's gotten so bad.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
even know how we got down this road, but
I
I mean,
know.
it's been a great conversation, but
Right. For sure. Well, and I think like, I think the other thing
but
for
anyway, I don't know.
well, so the last thing, because you had asked me before too, why it roused me up. Like, I'm a person, like, I want to always operate for my values, and I want to support the
Yeah.
businesses, and I want to
Yeah.
support the people, and I want to do the things that I know share my values. So if people aren't
Yeah.
also sharing where theirs are, and I get it, like, nobody has to, but for me, like, as a consumer, as a person moving throughout this world, like, I want to invest and support the things that I know align with my values, because the places that don't, look at the world, like, there's a lot of stuff going on with companies that I don't want to support. You know what I mean? And so I think that's part of why it gets me fired up too. Like, tell me where you stand so I know how to support whoever, you know? But
Yeah.
um in any case, so spiritual awakenings lead to boomerangs and spiritual discernment. That's, I think, maybe how we get started on it. Just making sure, because we're
Yeah.
like, it's not all love and light. We don't want all doom and gloom, but it's not all love and light, right? And how do we honor both and all the things?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, exactly. And I think when you start to look at things from a different lens too, I think you do start to recognize thought patterns and the way that you're responding to things, and
mhm,
being able to take a minute to control what you say and to really think about things before you say them. I think that's all a piece of it, and a part of it
yeah.
is it's really just a different lens, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, totally. So,
I would say, um, for anybody out there who might be going through a tough time, or maybe they feel like that there are some changes that are going on, and they feel like there's something bigger than them, and they're starting to open up a little bit more. Um, what do you think are some ways that they might be able to kind of lean into that a little bit, or anchor themselves a little bit? Because it can be a little chaotic in the beginning. It can feel uncomfortable. Um, And so I think, maybe some tips or tricks on ways that even you, like when you went through yours, how are some ways that you kind of helped yourself get through, all of that emotional stuff that came along with it? Meditation?
I thought you were gonna be like, when I said, "How do you wanna land this?" I thought you were gonna be like, "Oh, alright, so here's a little takeaway, we'll catch you next time." Not ask me a big, heavy question like that.
Well, all I'm asking
No,
for
it's
is
fine,
some
it's fine.
little quick
No, it's fine.
tips and
Yeah, but my brain doesn't work like that. I feel like people know this by now. No, well, honestly, what I started to think of was like, I feel like both times during the really significant ones, my first thought is always like, am I crazy? like,
yeah.
am I
Yeah.
capable of this? Am I going to be able to do this? Like, do I have the ability, like that kind of thing. It's all of this questioning of myself
Yeah.
in the moment. And I don't know how you give somebody tips or suggestions to learn how to like trust yourself in those
Trust.
moments, especially because if you don't know what trusting yourself is, like if you've been in situations where like, hey, I can't trust myself, or the trust that I had for myself was overridden somehow or whatever, it's hard to say like, okay, stick this out. Um, I think that I think having the right support in place is probably the biggest thing, right? Is
Mhm.
having somebody, whether it's in your circle, a professional, whatever, to be able to share what you're going through and to talk about what you're going through. And I think that's probably like the most significant thing, because none of the stuff I went through was in a silo by myself. There were different resources and
Right.
different people, different conversations. But I think having somebody in your circle who can like, validate that you're not crazy, help
Yeah.
you build that trust in yourself, be able to talk about those things, explore it. I think that's probably the biggest thing I would say, is having somebody there to do that. And if you don't, which, especially if you're going through something that's like a little bit spiritual or woo woo or whatever, where you're like, I can't talk to anybody about this. Um, I think one of the things that can be most helpful nowadays is to find the resources that are talking about it, because I think even
Yeah.
being associated in conversation, like via proxy, I think can help, so if there's if there's podcasts, I'm not saying that because we're recording a podcast right now, but like other people in this space who are talking about it, who are professionals, who maybe they're sharing on social, or maybe they're offering like surround yourself with people, even if it's not in your immediate network, but in the, you know, collective network who are talking about these things or who have experienced the things, because I think even just knowing that other people have gone through it takes some of the gravity away from experiencing it for the first time.
Yeah, I
So I
agree.
don't
I
know. I feel like
agree.
support in a way would be my first thing.
Yeah. Well,
What
and
about
there's a
you?
lot of information out there, on YouTube and
Yeah.
podcasts and
Yeah.
books and, things like that that you can use as resources.
Yeah, totally. More and more people I think are talking about these things and they're more comfortable sharing these things. And
Yeah.
they've been happening for so long, but we maybe just haven't had the resources to hear about it. So I think that can be really comforting as you're going through it. And then otherwise I'd just say like, woo, let yourself be open to it. like find
Trust
a thing.
yourself.
Yeah, and like find a thing that that might, you don't need to take on all sorts of you don't need to start meditating or doing yoga or doing this or journaling or doing gratitude or changing how, pick a thing that
Yeah.
you could feel supported by,
Yeah.
and just stick with that thing. And maybe it's just writing down what you're experiencing, right? Like that can also be, if you don't have a physical person to talk to or something, like that can be a big way to express yourself and to help process things and whatnot. So,
Hmm.
but it doesn't need to be like overwhelming, So the
Yeah.
tools can be helpful, but anyways,
Yeah. I agree.
that's probably what I
Coolly,
would say.
coolly. All right. Well, I think this
So,
is our longest episode
ooh.
because we had somehow tangented into like a political conversation that wasn't really
Yeah,
political, but
but it's
but
good.
that's
I
all
think
right.
I think it's good to have those conversations, right? I
I
don't
do
know.
too. Yeah,
So,
absolutely. I do. I think it's great. So, all
and we
right,
always end up
everybody.
laughing on the other side of them. So,
No, like how do we go down that rabbit hole?
right?
It's just the way it goes.
That's the way it goes. Welcome to our
Yeah.
podcast. So, we do have some exciting things coming up though.
We do.
So did you say we do as in like your
I said we do. Yeah,
Oh,
we've
okay.
got
I
some
was like,
great
wait, are you
things coming up.
questioning? Yeah. So there'll be some fun stuff that we have coming up for the month of March. So hope you'll be listening in. And yeah, Cammie,
We
you want to
we
send us
may
off?
I was gonna say we may or we may not have some pretty amazing special guests coming on our show that we're super
Yes.
excited about. So there's a little
Yes.
teaser for you.
Yeah.
So, well, guys, thanks so much again for listening. We really appreciate your support. For all of those of you who are listening, who have subscribed. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Share if this episode resonates with you or with somebody that you may know. Please share it with them. And we'll see you next week for one of our fun episodes. All right. Bye, guys.